Alright, so it's time to go over the other method you can use to get your meshes in-game and working, other than the NIF splicing method. In this case, we're going to be using the 3ds Max 2013 official workflow. Alright, I'll select the combined meshes. Oh, I did fix the nuts on the top, the bolts. I gave a separate smoothing group to these faces here and this top face so that there's not so much stress on the top to, conform to the surface, the normal map, the smoothing groups, so that there wasn't as much gradient artifacting going on. So I'll select all of these, and then we're going to go up back into our work folder, and we're going to make a new folder called FBX. This is just where we're going to dump our FBX files to then import into 3ds Max 2013. Again, the name doesn't really matter here. And yeah, so now we're in 3ds Max 2013. What you need to do is, to have this work, is to go to the Fallout 4 folder, your install, and go to the Tools directory. I think you need to install Creation Kit. I think you get this when you install Creation Kit, but yeah. Oh, if you're wondering how my files are all set up like this, if you right click and do group by type, then you get these separate sections of file types. It's just easier rather than a big mishmash of files. And I'm also using medium icons. But yeah, anyway, if we go into Tools and then we go to the NIF exporter, we can see here we have a README, which will simply tell us that you need 3ds Max 2013. It's only compatible with 3ds Max 2013. So you just use the installer and install it, and then you'll be able to export NIFs from 3ds Max 2013 as intended by the developers. So why was I working in 3ds Max 2015 and now we're in 2013? Well, because I did use 2013 a while ago, but I switched over to using 3ds 2015 because there's more compatible scripts with it, and I just got more used to it and its features. And so what I'm trying to really say is I prefer 2015. But what you can do is, feel free to model in 2013 and do everything else in 2013, and then make a new file to export. You can probably even use Maya to model your meshes, export from export FBX, and then import them into 3ds just fine. The point is, you can model in anything and import it into 3ds Max 2013, and then that's how we're then able to export using the official tools into NIF. So yeah, without further ado, let's get cracking. I'm going to import the receiver from the FBX folder, which we created just then, and we're going to add content to the scene, make sure the smoothing groups come in. I don't think this stuff is relevant, but I'll show it anyway. And you want scale factor to be 1.0 so that it comes in centimeters to centimeters. You can have it on automatic and it'll usually default to centimeters, but I like to make sure that it's specified. So that's in. I think to turn off the brackets, yeah, I'm just going to hit J to get rid of those. What we want to do is, hopefully we reset Xform before we brought all of these meshes in. It looks like we did. So again, in 3ds Max 2015, you want to make sure you reset the Xform before you bring before you bring your meshes into 2013. You want to make sure you've reset the transform so that we know exactly where it's gonna end up when it's nice and predictable. So now, let's first just go to shaded mode because I prefer it to be shadowless. We'll go to create, and then I believe it's helpers, and then point. Yep. Click anywhere on the grid, and then we're going to customize the size. So I'm going to go for 3 centimeters, and make sure it draws on top so that even when it's inside the mesh, we can still see it. I'll leave it colored green because this is going to be a different color later on. That doesn't really matter. And yeah, keep it as cross type. There's different customizations that you can do. There's different options that you've got for the point type. You can have a center marker. It's kind of subtle, but it's there. Axis tripod with arrows pointing out, and a box type. But I like to just use cross. It's more clear. So we're going to call this template point, and for the reason that we're going to be duplicating this point to make points for our mesh. And what we're going to do is going to go to object properties and type in SGO keep with a capital A equals 1. What this does is this flags the point so that when the exporter runs, it doesn't basically delete it, you know, wipe it. For 99% of nodes, this is what you're going to need for it to stick around in the export. So I'll shift drag out and copy this, and I'll call it weapon in all caps. That's important. It seems to be the case for every weapon. You need that. And we're going to zero out and the grid. So what I want to do is, this essentially determines the origin of the gun. So we'll definitely want to take a look at the 44 to see where its node is, the origin. And it looks like the origin is somewhere in the middle of here in the middle of the frame. And if we click on the weapon node here, there's the all caps weapon node. We can see that, yeah, it's roughly here. We take a look at our guide hunting revolver receiver. Then we can see that the origin is actually roundabout, which is quite helpful, on the join where the hammer curve sort of starts and the hemisphere ends. So roughly in this point. So we can actually use that. Go back to our revolver, and in fact what I'll do is I'll select everything that isn't the frame. Oh, should have held control there. Go to here, which is the connect tool. Not sure if I've showed it yet. Shown it, but if you basically everything is connected now to this one mesh, the frame. So when we move the mesh, obviously everything else is parented to it. Parented underneath it. It is the parent. So if we roughly move our point to where we observed, and get rid of this, then we can have the frame, the origin, the weapon node where we think it should line up well in game. So yeah, oh, this is I don't think I even described. This is the schematic view as it says there. To open it, you simply go to Graph Editors and do New Schematic View, or if you already have a schematic view open, you can click Save Schematic View and you'll open your currently existing one. This basically shows every object in the scene, be it meshes or nodes. So meshes are displayed in purple and nodes in green. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the template point over. It's kind of subtle, but there's a sort of grid here. I generally work in this area here for all of my parts. So I'm going to drag this up and then take the weapon node and then basically connect it underneath the master weapon node. So this is a good start. What we're going to do is I'm going to name this revolver receiver 0, the 0 denoting that it's a mesh. I'm going to do the same thing for all of these others. Just name them properly. So yeah, this is actually a scope. This is the scope modification. So what we're going to do is we're going to separate that out and put it somewhere else for use later, because it's going to be a separate modification, as you know. Trigger. Try and go as fast as I can because this is the obvious part. So that's the speed loader. Those are the casings. That's the cylinder, so you can just delete. Alright, so if you want to organize your nodes, you can go to Layout and then Arrange Children. There might be a bit of weirdness if you so if you move it around, it'll go with it, but if you disconnect one, you can see there's a small this empty slot appears sort of next to it, and that means when it moves, it won't go with it. So if we touch a few of these, then you can see that they don't come with the master node until we arrange children again, and that brings them back all in line. And obviously you can arrange children on the original weapon node, and that'll bring every node underneath it into form. So we have our meshes, but we don't have our bones yet. So I'll clone this. Oh, I'll collect object properties, not clone. We'll copy it and we'll call it C receiver, and parent it underneath the hunting revolver. As you see, layout and arrange children is very useful for bringing stuff online. If we take a look at our reference 44 again, I'll actually keep this open because it's useful to see which parents we need. We can see that the receiver node is a child receiver, and this connects it to that reference node which I mentioned a while ago in the weapon entry in the CK, the creation kit, which this receiver then bolts onto. And in a similar way, we're going to be creating these P points, parent points, for the different grips and scopes and barrels. So all we do is clone, and then we go P barrel, and we'll bring this up here. And if I hit shift, well, it's a shift key for me, shortcut, probably won't be for, oh yeah, F4 toggles edge view, F3 wireframe, both very useful at this stage. We want to have it in the middle. I'm going to just toggle the grid off in the background. We want it in the middle of the barrel, because that's where we put our attach point in the barrel NIF which we created. Clone again and go with P scope, and we will snap this to the edge here. I think is a good reference point. I can't remember if that is what we put in the NIF, but we're going to be recreating them anyway, so we can do it how we want. And then we'll do P grip, and that puts it here. I'm pretty sure it was on this corner. So as you can see with the snapping in 3ds Max, it's very fast to set up your parent points. So now would be a good time to save. So what I like to do is name my file as hunting revolver, and then just put capital bones after it, and then yeah, save it as that, because that differentiates it from the working this file which we're modeling in. This is the export file, and this is the modeling art file. Right, so we have our attach points in place. What we next need to do is actually hook up the bones which we're going to use. So in NIFscope, these were the NI nodes or NI nodes which you saw named certain ways. So if we go weapon magazine, then we know that the cylinder is a child of the weapon magazine. So if I hit the connect shortcut, oh, actually we need it in the first place. We need it in the right place to start with. So I'm going to click on the weapon magazine bone and align it. Yeah, there it is. And then align it using pivot alignment to the cylinder. So if we isolate, you can see that the weapon magazine bone, I'm going to wireframe. Wow, that doesn't help much, does it? Well, you can kind of see more clearly. The weapon magazine bone aligns to the pivot of the cylinder, and then we parent the cylinder to the weapon magazine bone. So if I did it the other way around, it would probably be a lot messier. It's here, we parent it, and then if we try and align it, you know, it's gonna move to where the cylinder is, but because the cylinder was, you know, parented to the weapon magazine bone, it's moved with it. So not too helpful. So align the node and then the cylinder to the node. So we also know that there are several weapon magazine child bones that are children of the weapon magazine bone. So we're going to start by connecting the child 1 bone to the weapon magazine, and then we'll simply create 5 clones. There you go. So I just had a genius idea, and because the hunting revolver only holds 5 rounds, I'm actually going to parent each casing to one of these children, and the actual bullet ends to one other bone, so I can animate the bullets independently. Something I just realised would be a really good idea, but that won't be obvious to you until later, after I've probably once we get to the animation stage it'll all become clear, but I'll have to separate these casings out, but the bullets will remain as one part, because when the bullets come in the speed loader, they'll obviously all be connected together and we'll just go straight in, whereas when the bullets fall out of the cylinder they can all come out separately. Again, this will all become clearer later on. Okay, so I just had a quick look at one of my previously made files just to make sure I'm on the right track. Let's take a look at the cylinder. So the cylinder is actually parented under magazine child 1, but because we're doing custom animation we can have it parented, we can have any of the meshes parented under any of the bones, but the main thing is we can't add any more bones that don't already exist. So we have to have, it has to be called weapon magazine, and it has to have, child 1 through 5. It has to have weapon extra 1, 2, 3. It has to have, what's the other one? Weapon optics, I think. I might as well open a reference file of a weapon I've done before, so I'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, so this is a good example. This is the layer mod, which I did. And you can see the sort of hierarchy which you're going to end up with. The meshes, these are collision meshes, we don't need to worry about them right now, but you can see where the P nodes are, the parent nodes, as well as the child nodes. So I think it's hard to do it from memory, but yeah, what I could do is actually have the C receiver under the weapon. I think that's how it's supposed to be. And then all of the additional nodes, such as weapon trigger and weapon extra, those are all under the original weapon node. What about weapon magazine? Okay, so that's connected to this node. The layer was quite a weird use case because there's a few weird things like a rotor point for the automatic barrel and stuff, so it might not be the best example. But node order isn't too finicky. You can kind of put stuff roughly where it needs to be, or not. You can, I think maybe the layer receiver doesn't have to be. It can maybe be parented under the actual mesh for the receiver or not. I'm not entirely sure. And a projectile node, even though that's usually in a barrel. Anyway, I'm getting off course, so let's create a weapon extra 1 bone and align it to the hammer, and then we can have the hammer. By the way, the schematic view, at least for me and at least in 2013, it doesn't always update accurately, so these faded meshes, these faded schematic points here are supposed to be hidden, but as you can see that these nodes are supposed to be visible. So if we close and reopen the schematic, it still didn't update. I'll just parent the hammer to the weapon extra 1, but usually resetting the schematic view refreshes the view in here, and basically what I'm trying to say is the schematic view doesn't always show what's going on accurately in the scene, so you know, a bit of a quick close and reopen tends to fix that. So I put the hammer under the weapon extra 1 because in the original NIF that is where the hammer is, and we're not really going to use weapon extra 1 for much else, so we might as well use it. So what other nodes do we actually have? We've got weapon bolt, which is actually empty. So there's no mesh is used under weapon bolt, it's just sort of floating out here aimlessly. So we can use it for our own purposes if we so wish. So we have the 5 children. We have the 2 optics nodes, and they're the same again, they don't have anything under them. We do have a weapon trigger node, so I'll make that now. Trigger. The naming is again very important. It's so that the animations can correctly pick up the bones. So the animation is going to be looking for these precise bone names. So one element which isn't actually present, I don't think, in the 44, or is it? I think there's a moon clip in there, isn't there? Yeah, moon clip, and that's under child 3. So we have the casings under child 4, and the actual bullets under child 5. So what I want to do is use one casing per magazine child. So we can't really use this, we can't put this under child 3 because I want to use it. So instead what we'll do is have it under, I think I'll be cheeky and use weapon optics, because weapon optics isn't really used for any gun as far as I've seen. Let's make sure that's X-formed because I don't think I remember to do it out of 2015. So yeah, that's under weapon optics 1. And I'll go ahead and separate the bullets now. So the bullets are fine, it's the casings I need to separate. So just detach each one. Got this casing 1. Through 5. And then, okay, so what you get here, this is the origin of the schematic view, and every time you create a new shape in the scene, let's create a new, I don't know, dummy, it appears sequentially across this line here, this origin line. So if you're wondering if, you know, you detached a mesh and you can't find it anymore, that's usually where it is at the origin of the schematic view. So the original casing's here, so that's weapon magazine child 1. Sometimes you need to zoom in to be able to see. And I'm just going to quickly parent each one. So as you can see by the blank side, if we start moving things around, it's not responding because I think because we moved the whole weapon then, the whole schematic hierarchy, it bumped everything out of a nice structured mode. So I'm just going to do a layout and arrange children again. So the bullets need to be underneath something. We are rapidly running out of bones, so I do need to figure this out. I might have overestimated how many extra ones we actually have, extra bones. So let's use weapon extra 2. What does the yoke? Okay, so yeah, okay, so the yoke is actually just under the weapon magazine bone anyway. What we need to bear in mind is the cylinder does need to rotate. So the bullets can animate independently. The cylinder needs to rotate independent of the yoke. So put the yoke under the weapon magazine. Now we really need one more bone underneath the weapon magazine, but because of the hierarchy, we can't actually do that. If we add a bone underneath weapon magazine, it'll basically bug out because it's not expecting there to be another bone there. This is another symptom of the schematic view. Sometimes you hover over and you get this thing and it just stays for some reason. So again, close, reopen, and it's gone. Looks like this is hidden for some reason. There we go. And I need to quickly figure out what else I can use. So there is a second weapon optics bone. And I think you can have up to 3 weapon extra ones. Yeah, so there's a weapon extra 3 here. But the issue is, will the 44... So when we talk about animations and what bones are supported and everything, we're effectively talking about subgraphs, which is a pretty advanced topic for later. But the subgraphs define everything. We can't currently edit them, at least the modding scene can't, and they define what bones are allowed to do, what bones are expected by the system, as well as how the weapon actually behaves. You know, what animations are triggered by certain things like sprinting and reloading. So effectively we can't really touch that sort of thing because it's just inaccessible. So yeah, I think I'll shoot for weapon extra 2 and I hope it works itself out. So later on in the animation phase, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to link the weapon extra 2 bone to the weapon magazine, so that when the magazine rotates out, it'll actually take the cylinder with it, even though it's not parented to the magazine bone. You know, I think what I'll do is I think I'll switch these around, because if you think about it, the yoke origin is way down here and the cylinder is lined up perfectly with the weapon magazine origin. So yeah, I'll switch these around so that when the weapon magazine rotates, all the casings do, but obviously the bullets aren't yet. Those should be, yeah, we need another bone for that. So yeah, it's all really about planning ahead and making sure you have enough bones for all the separate parts which you want to animate in the future. So we don't have anything under weapon optics 2. So yeah, for now, let's just make a weapon optics 2 and put the bullets underneath that. And then again, later on in the animation, I'll be linking weapon optics 2 to the magazine. What we do need to do is make sure the origin is in the correct position. So we're going to unlink, and that's flown back to the scene origin again. To actually avoid that, you would, let me just quickly, if you want to unlink something, you don't want it to go flying off back to the origin, just move it a little bit. That brings up the blank, and then we can unlink and it'll stay roughly where it is. I'm going to align this but not make it go any further in the Y. So hopefully, if I then select weapon magazine, okay, we're going to need to align that with weapon magazine, so I'll select these and then re-isolate, then align the weapon optics to the weapon magazine, taking in Y into account. Actually, yeah, if I had ticked Y position, then it would have been in the right place anyway, but oh well. And then we have the origin of weapon optics 2 is the same as weapon magazine. So obviously the location of these bones is very important in terms of rotation. So when you rotate a bone, you know, you get the expected result. So the speed loader we need to do the same with the speed loader because weapon optics is somewhere else. It's not anywhere near the speed loader. I think I'll just align the point somewhere where it makes sense. Okay, we're getting there. If we come out of wireframe view, then we can see that we still have our green imported combined material on. What we do need to do is give it a game compatible material, you know, the BGSM which we created. So let's open the material editor. If you don't get the slate material editor, again you need to convert it. So if you're in this compact one, just click modes and then go to the slate editor and you'll get this. And then we want to drag the BS. So there's two main ones which we're going to be using. BS effects, which is used for sort of glowing things, sort of effect materials which are like mostly self-emissive, and that sort of thing. Or BS lighting effects, which is the more conventional one, which is used for materials which are lit with, you know, textures. That's the general, my general understanding of these two materials, but they're probably a lot broader than that. So here we can see where we can load the BGSMs. So I'll simply click load. And then we need to go to our hunting revolver materials folder. So to actually navigate there in the end, because it wasn't in the history yet, because we've never been here, but I'll be able to click this drop down to get here quicker in the future. But we simply click on our receiver BGSM and then choose all of the meshes which we want to apply the material to, which is all the meshes in the scene. And then, aside from the scope, and then just click assign material to selection, and that assigns the material to the mesh. What we get is this lovely stark white render because 3ds Max doesn't render the material in the viewport, but that's fine. We can preview it in the creation kit just fine. So the next stage is to export. So we're going to click the weapon origin node and then hit export. And again, I had to navigate manually to my hunting revolver work folder. And what we're going to do now is create a new folder called Elric convert meshes. Go into that and create a new folder called meshes. It's confusing now, but it'll all come clear later. We'll click down here, we'll hit G to get Gamebryo NIFs, and we're going to export. So this name is important because it's our actual file name for the NIF to be used in game. So I'm going to call it hunting revolver receiver _1, which you might notice is the existing name for our NIF, which we're using as our receiver NIF. I'm going to choose PE weapon. This is the type of script which we're going to use to export our... So in this case we're doing a weapon, so obviously it's PE weapon, but if you're doing, say, a fridge or table or anything like that, it'd be static art. If you're creating some kind of custom projectile, it'll be a PE projectile. You just need to know which script does what. So click PE weapon, hit OK. Okay, so now we get an actual export warning. So we will view the log, and it tells us that the hammer mesh should have Xform reset. So I'll choose the hammer, and then I'll use my shortcut to reset Xform. Give that another stab. Luckily it did export something in the NIF, so I'll give that another go. And yeah, it went through correctly that time. Let's go to my... And then we have a NIF. Am I in the right place? No. Yeah, now I'm in the right place. Now we have our receiver NIF, so let's take a look. You can see the normal map is applying properly, so we have the correct material on. Bit of weirdness going on there, I might have to look into that. But the origin is in the right place. We might have to move the speed loader inside the mesh or hide it somehow so that it doesn't show up when we're looking at it in the Pip-Boy, because it probably will. But yeah, all the parts are in the right place, and it looks like we have a 0, 0 there. Let me just take a quick look. So obviously this is all, iterative, trial and error type stuff. It's always, you can never remember exactly how to do it every time. At least I can't. So we might have a NIF here, but it's what's classed as a raw NIF, which means we need to process this with Elric, the program which I named in the path which we just made, the folder. And Elric is going to process all of our NIFs and convert them for use in the game. So this fade node is going to turn into a proper, NI node, NI node, and that kind of thing. So to find Elric, all we need to do is go to the tools folder, blind Elric, and then we can open it. Right, so here we have Elric. It's the program which is gonna let us convert raw NIFs into NIFs and our TJs into DDS. TJs are the files that we're going to export from Painter, the texture files, into DDS, which are used by the game. So I'll open the options. I'm pretty sure these are all default. I didn't actually change anything, but just in case, here they are. And yeah, right, let's put an output directory. So we want to go to our... So this is where we're going to dump all of the raw NIFs, and then in here is where it's going to be our converted NIFs. Oh, I must have put them there earlier. So we're going to go in here, grab the path, paste it, and then convert files. Oh yeah, I need to actually export the file first. I re-recorded this part because Elric went a bit odd for the tutorial. So I just need to export this once again, apologies. So yeah, that's there. So our raw NIF is now in this file, this folder, and we can click it and then it'll go to the meshes subfolder here. So now we want to actually put this into our game file. So what I like to do is I like to go to the Hunting Revolver folder. Grab the path and then just create a shortcut to it and call it something that makes sense. And we can copy our converted NIF from Elric, double click it and then paste over our current receiver. So yeah, let's take a look in game and see what the result is. Okay, so what do we have here? Look at this abomination. This is actually exactly what I was expecting. So because I'm going to be using custom animation, I don't really care where the nodes are. You can see that the hammer obviously isn't in the right place, but it's still under the weapon extra 1 bone, and I can actually position that bone wherever I want. The reason why this is happening is because it's currently using vanilla animations, and it's using the FO4 animation, so it's expecting, it looks like the cylinder's using weapon optics 2, and that looks like roughly where the weapon optics 2 bone actually was on the gun. It was sort of down and to the left of the cylinder, so it's exactly where we were expecting that to be. If you did want to use vanilla animation, you can use the 3ds Max 2013 workflow. You just need to make sure your bones are in the exact same positions as the vanilla weapon NIF bones. So your hammer, the position of the weapon extra 1 bone in your case would have to be exactly the same as it is in the 44 NIF, if that makes sense. So again, you can use both the NIF splice method. Well, you can really only use the NIF splice method for vanilla animation. Well, actually, that's not really true, is it? You can use both workflows for custom animation. It's just I believe that the 3ds Max workflow is a lot cleaner and actually a lot simpler to learn than the NIF workflow, and therefore makes it much easier, much more approachable to do custom animation with, because of stuff like X-form and making sure the origins are all in the correct position, stuff like that. So yeah, it looks good. I'll be able to fix all of this when the time comes to do the custom animation. One other thing I wanted to mention, if we go into the Pip-Boy, if I turn my UI on, and then go into the Pip-Boy, if we actually preview the weapon, everything's in the right position. And the reason for this is because this is just viewing the NIF, it's not loading any animations on the weapon. So obviously, if it's not loaded the 44 animations, then there's no popping, there's no exploding, because it's not moving the bones around right now. We're just basically previewing the NIF as it is. So yeah, that's really all that I wanted to mention in regards to that. Okay, so I thought I would show an example of what you can actually get away with in terms of what bones you can use for certain things. And as an example, I thought I'd show the vanilla plasma receiver, which has these sort of valve things at the top, which when you're in auto fire, or I think even just regular fire, these depress in when you're firing as part of the animation. So if we actually take a look, each one of these, so this one's on the weapon extra 3, this one's weapon extra 2, I think one of these, yeah, here we go, weapon trigger. So obviously every single bone has been used. Here's the 2 optic bones. All 6 of these are under, you know, bones which are available but aren't necessarily named suitably for the part that's being animated by them. So you know, we've got trigger, optics, and whatever. You can literally, as long as your bone naming is correct, you can really use these bones for whatever purpose. So I could be using weapon trigger for my hammer bone. It doesn't really matter. The only thing that does matter is, yeah, the names, because it's expecting these, you know, weapon extra 1, 2, 3. So I think in total there's 12 bones. Let me count them out. So there's weapon magazine childs 1 through 5. Then there's weapon optics 1 and 2, and then weapon extra 1, 2, and 3, and then weapon trigger. I think that's all of them. So that gives you quite a few different moving parts to play with, but sadly you are limited to that many bones. So just keep that in mind. And as another tip is just study the vanilla NIFs. You know, use Bethesda Archive Extractor and extract it and take a look yourself, because you learn a lot through just studying what they've done with the in-game assets and what sort of little tricks they've used. This is pretty cool. They've got a sort of perspective trick going on here with the normal map. So when you peer in for a brief moment, it sort of looks like there's a fake depth there, which I think is pretty interesting. But they have modeled the screw out. So yeah, study the vanilla NIFs, see how they're set up in order to create your own NIFs, whether it's through NIFscope or 3ds 2013.